Hi there, and thank you for tuning in to Dukascopy TV today. Well, a few weeks ago, I paid a visit to the United Nations to have a look at the International Labour Organization's report, Global Employment Trends for Youth 2013, A Generation at Risk. Now, youth unemployment is estimated to reach 12.8% in 2013. Now, the question is, are we facing a lost generation? What happens? Where's the future for this generation? Well, on this topic today, I am joined by Ekkehard Ernst, and he is an economist at the ILO here in Geneva. Hi, Ekkehard. So, first of all, if we have a look at these, like the age group for this report, what age group is this representing? How does it compare to other ages in terms of unemployment?
Well, when we talk about youth unemployment rate, we mean the group of 15 to 24 years old. And for these people, the youth unemployment rate is typically 2 to 3 times higher than for the rest of the population. Which is to say that, for instance, in advanced economies like the US, Spain, Germany, Italy, we see that youth unemployment rates are around 20–25% in comparison to for the rest of the population at around 10–12%.
And I know last time, Ekkehard, we discussed Spain. Now, for Spanish youth who actually have third level, unemployment is actually 35%. Now, Greece tops the list. It's about 40. And then we also have Turkey and Portugal, which are also quite high in this list for people who are unemployed youth and actually have third level education. Now, why is this? Why are these countries having such high levels of unemployment when they have third level in comparison to places like Latvia, Slovakia, and so on?
Well, first of all, we have to see that in general, the labor market in these countries that you are describing is very weak. So we have high unemployment and high youth unemployment in general, which means that only also those who have a relatively advanced degree suffer from the weak state of the labor market. In addition, you have certain effects like in Spain, where the education is not properly targeted towards what firms are actually needing. In Greece, you have a different problem where young people prefer to wait to get a job in the public sector rather than trying to seek something with more difficulties in the private market. So you have various numbers of reasons why we have these high youth unemployment rates even for highly educated people.
And what are they doing right now? Are they leaving the country or are they getting benefits? You know, what is government benefits like for, what is the unemployment, the dole like for these people? Or are they actually getting involved in crime or, what are they doing?
Well, for young people, it is actually very difficult to get any benefits at all. What is available in some of these countries are some targeted measures to get them back into employment, for instance, to some subsidy schemes, or what we now increasingly see, some support measures to finance jobs for them. But often enough, they try to get away, especially if they're highly educated. Now, this is not always easy. Often as language barriers, cultural barriers, people do not necessarily want to move away. We have seen in Europe now an increasing number of programs where those countries who fare relatively well, like Germany or Austria, try to attract educated people from Spain, from Italy or from Greece.
And the figures in this report clearly demonstrate something needs to be done. Policy changes need to be implemented. Now, what sort of policy changes does the ILO recommend? And of course, what type of obstacles are they facing?
Well, the ILO has been recommending not only in this report but systematically that at least 3 things need to be done when we talk about youth unemployment rate. First of all, the general state of the economy has to improve, and that means in Europe, in European countries, the austerity measures that are currently being implemented need to stop. There needs to be more demand for firms to actually be able to hire new labor. That has partly something to do with the fact that the banking sector still needs to be cleaned up. And the obstacle to this is obviously that we face a huge problem in doing this, in putting more money up on the table. So this can only be done if it's done in a coordinated way with those countries that have actually some funding power left to help those that are more in need. A second policy that we have been recommended and where we're very glad to see that the EU Commissioner has been going the same direction is targeted measures for young people to either get a job or a training guarantee. These are measures where you basically try to target those people who are most at risk of being lost completely for the labor market, to get them a job or a training to help them find an alternative opportunity later on. And third, more of a long-term or long perspective, is that we need to improve the education and training system in some of these countries, which is to say that there needs to be a stronger attachment of what is being taught to what is needed on the labor market. And that can happen, for instance, through more apprenticeship systems or through better linkages between universities and the private sector.
And speaking about apprenticeships, like I know in the United States, for years and years now, these type of apprenticeships and internships have been very, very common. But I've actually noticed, well, in Ireland, only since the recession that we've started to get into this internships. It never happened before. You kind of expected from third levels to go into a big job, being paid about at least 30,000 euros. That was before the recession. But now, obviously, if you get an internship, you're very, very lucky and you're only maybe getting a stipend. Now, if we look at Spain, Greece, Portugal, all these other countries, is it quite similar? Is this idea of internships very new?
It is certainly very new in the Southern European countries, but what is important is that also for firms it's a new perspective that they actually have to invest in their young workforce in order to make them ready and productive for their businesses.
And if we fail to make the right policy changes, what type of future do these youth have?
Well, what we see for the moment is that already long-term unemployment rates for young people has increased very dramatically, and that means that these people are permanently or for a long period lost for the labor market. They will be lost for opportunities, and they will lose the skills that they have, especially educated people. So if we fail to make these policy changes, that means that we have actually a much bigger problem 10-15 years down the road, and that multiplies itself through less income for young workers, less possibilities for the state to actually get revenues to finance its activities, and so the problem will just multiply itself and grow bigger and bigger the longer we wait for implementing these changes.
And just one last question, looking at in universities more academic subjects like English literature, do you think in the future there'll be less and less people doing more academic stuff where it's harder to get a job?
That's possible, but what is most important is not so much whether the education is academic or not, but whether it's relevant for the private sector. And here there needs to be an effort both at the level of education system or educational institutions and the private sector to get better in contact, to better inform each other what is actually needed and what is available. And I think there are certainly issues where particularly in Southern European countries, there needs to be a much more intensive contact between education institutions and the private sector.
Yeah, because just following up on that, I know in America they're trying to encourage kids to learn how to code because they need to fill this gap for IT because IT is huge. Pretty much need to be doing the same in Europe, encouraging youth to get involved more in IT and less so in areas that are kind of redundant now for the labour force. Is that true? That
is absolutely correct, that we need to make sure that young people also choose those subjects where there is a demand for them in the future, instead of, for instance, going into psychology or philosophy, doing more technical jobs. And that requires simply that also young people need to get in touch with the private sector much earlier, for instance through internship systems that are already happening throughout their studies, not only waiting until they're finished and graduated.
Thank you very much, Ekkehard. Well, viewers, I hope you enjoyed this interview because I did. Stay tuned to Dukascopy TV for more interesting interviews and press reviews. But for now, have a great day.